I'm Mark Bannister. I'm Dean of the College of Business and Entrepreneurship here at Fort Hays State University, and I'm very pleased to welcome you tonight. The MBA Dinner has become a tradition of the MBA program. It's a back-to-school activity that helps new students and faculty in the MBA program to get to know each other. It's a way for us to welcome our new students. It's a way for us to feature an alum each year from the MBA program who has advice and wisdom to share with our entering students. And we'll talk more about our speaker later. This is also a process of helping to polish our students. We want you to impress as you leave Fort Hays State University, and so a component of this dinner is indeed professional development. And a important part of this is working through how would we deal with a business dinner. Some of you students have had the opportunity to be part of internships. Some of you are non-traditional and have a little more experience, but some, this is still a very new experience, a new horizon. Rachel Dolacek is our MBA coordinator. I think all the students have had the chance to interact with Rachel, have begun to realize she is an extremely important person in your life. And as some of the alumni have said, if you just listen to Rachel, everything works. And so I encourage the MBA students to take that bit of piece of advice. Rachel, in addition to being the MBA coordinator, is also an adjunct instructor for business communication. And tonight, she will speak to us about business etiquette. Please welcome Rachel Dolacek.
Thank you. Okay, as Dr. Bannister said, my name is Rachel Dolacek, and I get the privilege of being your academic advisor. I've talked to many of you as you started this journey, and I'm excited to be along with you for the next few years as you go through the program. So tonight, we wanted to start with, what is etiquette? So the dictionary definition of etiquette is the rules governing the proper way to behave or to do something. And it's actually very essential to your success. But that definition seems very strict to me. Etiquette is actually not a rigid code of manners. It's simply how persons' lives touch one another. So we're going to start talking about etiquette regarding table manners. Table manners are the single most important benchmark of etiquette. People sitting at your table will judge you by your table manners. And it can be very key in distinguishing you from your competition. So before the meal, don't be late. That's very key. Once you get to your table, you can immediately put your napkin on your lap. Tonight we have an already decided menu, but if you are in a situation, maybe a job interview in the future, order medium-priced dishes. So nothing too expensive. I know that you're hungry, and there may be some very nice options, but go with a medium-priced dish. And order food that is easy to eat. Though you may be a fan of barbecue or spaghetti or one of those options, think about how that's going to be to eat that meal. And so choose something, make it a little bit easier on yourself. If you take a minute and look at your place setting, during the meal, we're going to start with the utensils and on the outside and work in. Your food plates are on your left and your drink glasses are on your right. If this was a meal where food would be passed around the table, you'll always pass food to the right. Later on, we'll have bread baskets on the table, and at many restaurants, those will already be sitting on the table. And it's sometimes confusing what to do with that bread basket. So first, if you're the one who wants to pick up the bread basket, you're going to offer it to the person at your left and then start passing it to your right. You'll want to, when you have the bread on your plate, take a piece of bread at a time, butter it, and eat it. You don't want to sit there and eat the entire piece of bread all at one time. This is a similar place setting to what we have in front of us today. It's a formal place setting. Ours tonight is a little bit different with the dessert fork and knife that's sitting there, and you'll see why a little bit later. So when the server brings out your meal, they will serve you from your left side, but when they're picking up your dish, they're going to come around to your right side to pick everything up. You can start eating when everyone at your table has been served, and you certainly want to pay attention to the speed of your eating. I don't know about any of you, but these days at my house, speed is not something we're paying attention to. So that is something I'm usually with my kids and trying to get them situated and not really paying attention to myself. So that's something I have to definitely be aware of when in a formal setting. So another thing to consider, when you are eating, chew with your mouth closed. If someone at your table asks you to pass the salt, pass both the salt and pepper at the same time. You're always going to want to keep those together. And lastly, you want to keep your elbows and your arms off the table. So what about alcohol? Tonight we don't have any alcohol at this event. We're on campus, and that's not something we could do. But if you are in a situation where there is a choice, if it's an interview, don't have any. That's the best option. It is okay to tell the server no thank you. If you are at an employee or employer event, proceed with caution. People who drink too much at office parties often risk serious harm to their careers. So if your employer sees you being irresponsible with alcohol, how can you be trusted with additional responsibilities at work? Go with the one drink rule. And so that rule is either have one drink or have none at all. Signals to the server. If your napkin is in your chair, that means you're coming back. If your napkin is to the left of your plate, you're finished. If your utensils are parallel pointed to 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock, you're finished. And so that's a cue to the server to come and get your plate. And it's okay to ask the server if you drop a utensil, if you spill something, or if a utensil is dirty. But something to remember in this situation, you don't want to make a scene. You want to be as quiet as possible. Don't raise your hand and make loud gestures, and just be relaxed and quietly raising your hand about halfway, not all the way up, and not yelling would be appropriate. We also wanted to talk about dress. I know this is something we mentioned when we invited you to this dinner. It's something that we've talked about in classes that you have been in, even to this point in the first few weeks. But the clothes you wear invite judgments, no matter how well you conduct yourself. If you're in an interview or going to an interview, dress a notch up. So the rule of 2-0. You don't want your clothes to be too tight. You don't want them to be too loose. You don't want your clothes to be too long or too short, too much makeup, too little makeup, too much jewelry, too casual, too formal. The list can go on. The key is you don't want to stand out in that setting because of what you're wearing. So you can't go wrong with, for men, a dark suit, a white shirt, tie, dark shoes, and long dark socks. Gals, you can't go wrong with a dark jacketed suit with either knee-length skirt or long slacks, a white blouse, minimal accessories, and dark closed-toed shoes. So while I can tell you what Emily Post says or what all of our business communication textbooks say, I think something very important is to ask our employers, what do they think? How do they feel about dress? How do they feel about etiquette? Just so happens we have several graduates out in the field who are doing very well, and when asked some of these questions, they were willing to give us some responses based on their experience. Megan Schaller is an MBA graduate, graduated a few years ago, and is now working as a human resource administrator at Sunflower Electric. So when we asked her, what type of dress do you expect a candidate for a position within your company to wear to an interview? She said, professional dress. Dress is very important. It displays the respect you have for the position in the company. She also said that etiquette is important in this process. Part of their process, they typically do have a candidate in a lunch setting when they're in the interview process. It's part of their getting to know you process, and they do expect a certain level of etiquette. Tara Eck is a friend of Fort Hays State and works for Koch Industries and hires many of our graduates. So when I asked her, how important is dress in your workplace? She said, very important. Dress for the job you want to have, not the job you have. I thought it was also interesting when we asked, how do our students compare to other students from different universities? She said, resumes are usually good, but FHSU candidates are often not strong at communicating in interviews. So I'd like to talk about that last comment from Tara, because I think that's an important one. Tonight, you know we're going to practice our table manners. We're already dressed up. So the last piece of this is the communication piece. So no matter what field of business you're in, the way you speak is fundamental to how you're perceived. So small talk, if you're in an interview setting, if you're in any company function, that's safe territory. So whether it's talking about sports, the weather, music, movies, current events, or pop culture, you probably couldn't go wrong. You're probably going to want to stay away from politics, religion, family, or financial matters. Some people say that the best way to work on your conversation skills is to ask questions. And so questions such as, have you ever been to this kind of event before? Or how long have you been working in this profession? How long have you been a teacher at Fort Hays State? So tonight, I want to challenge each of our students at the tables. This is a great opportunity to work on your conversation skills. And I challenge each of you to start a conversation. So it is my hope by taking this challenge, you'll be more comfortable in asking questions in your MBA classes, in group projects, and in a future interview or work event. So I hope you enjoy the conversation tonight, as well as the food. So let's eat.
I hope everybody enjoyed dinner. It was a delicious meal, and our wait staff and our prep staff have left the room, or we'd thank and recognize them. But I hope everybody enjoyed the food as much as I did. Tonight we have the privilege of having one of our MBA alumni speak to us. The MBA program began in 1978, and since that time period we have had alumni do a number of things. We have alumni scattered from coast to coast in the United States and a number of places really throughout the world. And we have a number of Chinese students in this year's class. We have a number of Chinese graduates that are in China and elsewhere, as well as our American and African and European and other students that have come through this program, and we're very pleased. Our guest tonight is an alum who has been very successful right here in Hays, Kansas. Claire Guston is the Vice President for Member Services and External Affairs at Sunflower Electric Power Corporation. Her primary responsibilities include working with Sunflower's members and the Western Kansas Rural Economic Development Alliance on economic development projects. She's also responsible for Sunflower Electric's interface with the public. Claire earned both her bachelor's and her MBA from Fort Hays State University. Please welcome Claire Guston.
Well, thank you. I have to say, I feel very humbled to be invited to visit with you this evening. I was thinking about a couple of things as I got ready for this. First of all, people I grew up with, and I am a native of Kansas. I've lived in western Kansas almost all of my life. But people that grew up with me would know that I was very shy and quiet. And so for me to be at this point giving a speech to a group about this, I know my music teacher for sure, back from junior high, would be shocked that I could get up and do that. And there's a story behind that I'm not going to go into. But the other thing is, and we were visiting about this at dinner. I got my undergraduate degree here, and when I graduated, I decided that I wanted to get a master's degree in student personnel counseling. So to be a placement officer, or there are lots of things you can do with that. And my mom said, also a Fort Hays graduate, my mom said, you know what, go work for a while. And once you finish, once you work a while, if you decide you want to go back and get a master's, we'll help you. Well, I did. I went to work at a small private college, and did work in student personnel counseling, and decided that was not for me. And so I came back to Fort Hays and got my MBA, and I actually got it 30 years ago in May, which seems like yesterday. When I first went to Fort Hays, one of my thoughts was, when I get my degree, I'm out of here. I am going to shake this Midwest dust off my boots, and I will be a city girl. Well, so today I'm speaking in front of a group, and in the job that I have, I address groups quite often. And secondly, I have moved, probably 9 miles from the Fort Hays State campus. We have a farm out in the county. So, who knows what life has in store for you. I would say, as you look at embarking on your careers, you've picked a great school. You have picked a great program. You have great faculty. So, what I hope to share with you tonight are the things that I've learned over the last 30 years. And in my job, I do legislative work, I do rural development, but I think I can bring some points together, just things I've learned, a lot about leadership and personal growth. And so I do appreciate having the opportunity to visit with you. These are things that you may or may not learn in a classroom setting. I hope you do. I hope the curriculum has changed in 30 years and these are more mainstream than they were then. But the first point I want to make, and I only have 4 of them, the first point I want to make is learn to be a servant leader. Now, Robert Greenleaf wrote his first book about servant leadership in the 90s. He retired from AT&T, and I think he is credited with being the first guy that really said, you know, this notion of how we serve each other as fellow employees really does have a place in the corporate world. Now, I'd been part of leadership programs. In fact, back in high school, our diocese had leadership programs for our church, our youth group. And so I understood the concept of Christian leadership. And, you know, for teenagers, it was appropriate to be talking about how you engage people and involve the kids that were not speaking up or that were shy or quiet. That was me. So I appreciated that. But the whole notion of servant leadership in today's world is so much broader than that. It is so much more than just being kind to people and being respectful. It's really about having an attitude of service. Greenleaf says you should approach every interaction you have every day with the hope that that person comes away a better person because they have had an interaction with you. Now that's pretty remarkable if you think about that. But in the business setting, as I think about servant leadership, and I have to confess, I've not read Greenleaf's books. I tried 2 different books. They're very academic, no offense intended, but way too deep for me. My favorite book about servant leadership is called The Servant, and it was written quite a number of years later by a guy by the name of James Hunter. And I love to read, and I like business books or management books that tell the story in a fictional setting or in a story setting, and that's certainly what Hunter's done with The Servant. It's a story about a group of managers that come together and actually go on a retreat. His notion is that as a servant, it's my job to help the people I work with be successful and to meet their needs. For my boss, that means I'm accountable, I'm doing the things that I promised I would do to help the organization be successful. For my peers, the same thing. I'm holding up my end of the bargain for the project or the background work I need to do or whatever it is. And for the people that report to me, to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to give them the resources and support and mentoring that they're successful. And just think about an organization, if everyone had that mindset, I go to work every day because I want to help the people around me be successful. And why is it important? I think it's important because all of our organizations, whether you end up working for a not-for-profit or a university and you're a teacher and impact many, many lives every day, or working in the private sector, we need people who care about each other enough and want everyone's success. And I know anecdotally, my last research I did was back in my MBA years, but I know anecdotally, I've seen it happen too many times, those people who are true servant leaders are acknowledged and rewarded. It's like they want to be helpful and they don't care if they get the credit. And when you have an attitude of a lot of people pulling together as servant leaders, great things can happen. One of the other things that my second point of advice is to know how you work. Now, what does that mean? Well, all of us have our favorite or tendencies for how we take in and process information. And those basic tendencies influence how we work. we're going to be most successful if we get to work those ways. So if you haven't done so, go to the Kelly Center. I trust that's still the place to do those kinds of assessments. And have someone help you do Briggs-Myers, DISC, Gregoric Style Delineator. There's a number of systems that can be used to help you understand, how do I work best? Well, why is that important? Well, first of all, two pretty basic things. A good understanding of how you work best really helps you set yourself apart or set yourself up to work on projects in a way that you know you're going to be best at. And secondly, the other end of that spectrum, if I'm really good at these things, there's probably some things I'm not so good at. And it also opens up the opportunity to go work on ways for you to be more successful and be more well-rounded. I'll use myself as an example. I am a big picture thinker. I love to just, give me a challenge, and I have so much fun thinking about all of the ways you could connect people, or how could we solve it with this? Could we go get help from these people? The opposite of that, being very detail-oriented and very rote. It's a weakness of mine. Well, it's not my favorite thing to do, I'll say it that way. Now, I wouldn't be a vice president if I hadn't somewhere along the way figured out how to do those detail things. Very few of us are going to work in organizations where we have the luxury to just hire people to go do the things we don't like to do. So understanding why this is important is understanding what am I good at, and how do I turn those aptitudes into help for projects, stronger work skills, also helps me improve on those things that are my shortcomings. So when you walk into the interview, or you land the job and you walk into your boss's office, you get to say, I think I would be good on this project because I'm a very detail-oriented person. I have the ability to identify the process and the things that need to happen to pull this together, and then implementation will come much smoother with the proper plan. Instead of saying, well, I want to work on that project because I really like technology, or I really like people, or I like numbers. You've added so much value to yourself. And frankly, the next thing I was going to say is love the work you do. And so being able to develop your skills so you are best at what you do is so important. Before I get to your loving the work you do, I want to say something about, and I've termed this learning from yourself, or I work with a lot of engineers and technical people. They would call it continuous process improvement. And I know you've all heard that. But when I think about learning from yourself, I would challenge you to really, as you finish anything, and these concepts, this all applies at home. It applies in the work you do out in the community. But you get done with the project, and what's your tendency? If it went really well, everybody's high-fiving, you're having the celebration beer or coffee or whatever it is, and everybody says, whew, I'm glad that's done, let's get back to work. We're on to the next thing. If it was a bad project, everybody's like, oh my gosh, let's put that away. Don't remind me what happened, we're going to move on. Well, to me, the learning from yourself comes from getting disciplined about asking 3 questions. What worked? What didn't? And what am I going to fix next time? Because the things that worked need to be applied to other projects. What was it that made things go so well? Was it the team you had pulled together? Was it the circumstance? Was it the ability for technology? So your committee calls, company I work for has people spread all over western Kansas. We use technology every hour of the day to communicate. So what worked? And it's more than just how do we think about this next time we do this project, but how do we apply that to what we're going to do tomorrow? Because if I can learn something from that, I'm better, the next project's better. And the same with asking what went wrong. Things go wrong, you know? Anyone thinks that they've never had a project fail is not being honest with themselves or you. Oprah says she's learned the most from her failures, and I agree with that. As I look at my career, the things that really stand out, I'll never forget that lesson. But you have to be disciplined at first to ask the questions and stop and ask what happened and why, and then what am I going to do differently next time? I think sometimes, you know, we come out of projects with all kinds of fancy notebooks, notes, and records of what happened, but how often do we really stop and say, what did I learn, and what am I going to change? Because it's that self-transformation. I'm always trying to be better. I'm always trying to be a better team member for whatever project I'm working on. And at the end of the day, everyone benefits from that whole process. And I would say if you're in an organization where people don't want to, we formally get together and do those, we call them debriefs. You know, okay, if the rest of the team doesn't want to do that, then grab your cup of coffee or go to lunch. And as you're talking about sports and whatever, just say, hey, what'd you think about that? You can do your own reconnaissance, get that information, and you can, if nothing else, use that to help you understand how could I do something better next time? And then my final point, know what you're passionate about. And, you know, I mentioned growing up that I was a very bashful person. I remember I hated dodgeball days in PE because I was always the last person picked because, of course, I cowered in the corner not wanting to go near dodgeball. And for those of you that did not grow up in a culture that played dodgeball, you're lucky. But, you know, and I remember when we first moved back to Hayes and I started getting involved in some things in the community, anytime someone would call me and say, well, Claire, would you work on this committee, or would you be interested in joining this organization, or even, there was even a board that I was part of, that I was so flattered about being invited that I said yes, way too much. And as I think back about that, I got to a point, well, you know, some children happened and you get busy enough. All of a sudden, there was one organization that I dreaded going to the board meetings. And it's a organization that I really believe in. And I finally came to peace with myself that I was better off just giving them money and letting someone else serve on that board that was more passionate about that than I was. And I have to say, when I made that turn to say, I'm going to work on things that I'm passionate about, you know, I don't know if it was coincidental or not, I don't think so, you know, my career really took off. One of the things I'm passionate about, if you can't tell, is leadership and personal development, and having the opportunity to use my skills not only inside the company but outside the company was a godsend to me. And had I been doing things that I wasn't necessarily well suited for, I wouldn't have had the energy to do that. And so really know what is important to you and get involved in those things that give you the rewards you're looking for. Confucius, as you can tell, I love quotes. Confucius says, do work you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And I really, really believe that. I've been so blessed to get to do work that I love all of my life, and to get to live in Hays, Kansas, where we have our farm and our cows and our cats, that I'm really thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the education I got at Fort Hays, which led me down the career path to be able to say that. So, you know, a lot of people say when you go to a conference or hear a speaker, if you can come away with 1 point, it's been worth your time. And as I thought about that, you know, I actually hope that none of you have heard anything that's news to you. I hope that you're self-aware. I hope you know what you're passionate about and what work you want to do. I hope you know where those resources are to go ferret out, helping you understand how can I be the best employee that I can. Because at the end of the day, what we all want is to have successful lives. Our work lives are important. We want to have successful personal lives and make a positive contribution to our communities. So who knows which one of you will be here 30 years from now speaking to the class of MBA students. But with that, I would say good luck, and I wish you the best.
You can see why Claire has been very successful in her career. And we're very pleased and proud to have her as an alum and have her as somebody that every day represents us in the workforce and the community and in her home. And so Claire, thank you so much for your helpful words and for sharing with us this evening. I'd like to thank everyone who's participated this evening. The faculty that are part of the MBA program, thank you for turning out and supporting the students. Students, thank you for turning out and taking this risk to come out and do something that's a little different, something to learn about, something to interact with fellow classmates and your faculty. And I appreciate the opportunity that we have to get this group together. Students, I very much wish you success during the time period you're in the MBA program. If any of us can help you as faculty, as administrators, as mentors, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here to serve you. Thank you, and everyone have a wonderful evening.